media, please don't hesitate to sound off in the comments section and we'll get to your questions answered by our awesome panel. So, why don't we start with some basic introductions, shall we? Introduce our panel here. You're closest to me. You go first. Go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit of who you are, and maybe we throw in the when you started transitioning.
All right, cool. Well, I'm Will, and I work here at the Sexology Institute. I do media and event coordination. And
he's an Emmy award-winning media person. Let's just say that too.
But yeah, so and I've been transitioning socially a little over a year, about a year and a few months, and then medically I've been transitioning for 10 months. So I'm coming up on the anniversary, my anniversary. So I'm excited. But yeah, so that's me.
Awesome.
I'm Parker Radborn. I am a
You guys have a seat over there. Go ahead. Yeah, just watch your step.
no tripping. People have to hear me.
We're just introducing ourselves to the panel, so you guys didn't miss much. All right, so go ahead, Parker.
So I'm Parker Radborn, professional photographer, trans man, and activist for human rights, mostly LGBTQ. And that's what I do. And I've started transitioning when I was 21-ish. And I'm 28-ish, so that's 7 years.
Gotta do math. Sometimes math is always the hard part.
It really is.
Awesome. So we are missing one of our panelists, and when he gets here, we'll have him do his introduction. Just because he's late doesn't mean he gets to miss the introduction part. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper. For everyone, whether you're any part of the LGBTQIA+ spectrum, there's always a big coming out process. Whether you're coming out as a sexual identity or it's a gender identity, it's a coming out process. So what has been your coming out process like for you guys?
For me, I first started, I confided with Erin, who works here, and I talked to her first and kind of was like, now that I know what I need to do, how do I do this? She's like, just tell people. And I was like, no, it's not that easy. She's like, just start introducing yourself as Will and tell people. I'm like, okay. And I was so awkward coming out to them. I'm like, I'm Will now. And they're all like, cool. All right, Will.
It took me a second.
Yeah.
On the schedule, all of a sudden there was a Will schedule. I was like, who the hell's Will? I was like, did we hire someone and I didn't know? And then he came up and I was like, oh, it's Will.
He was like, oh, okay, it's you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so here at work, it was the easiest, honestly. But for my family, I chickened out and I texted my sister, and she then outed me to the rest of my family. So angry phone calls and stuff later, ta-da, I was out. So I kind of got outed for me.
You're not even Mexican.
I'm from the South, you know,
Yeah,
the
that's
Gap.
South, yeah.
So, you know, it's a Georgia thing too.
Yeah.
Everyone gossips about you. So I didn't even have to come out to all the people at home. They all know because of my parents. But yeah, so that's kind of how it was for me. And most people, you know, I lost some friends and stuff because of it, and that was painful. But honestly, going through it, you realize who's there for you. So for me, I found it to be overall like a positive experience.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. What about you, Parker?
Well, like most trans people, I've come out multiple times. First, it was coming out as, first I was found out as a non-straight person by my family. I didn't know if I was gay. I didn't know if I was bi. I didn't know what I was. I just knew that I wasn't straight. And that was when I was 20, and they found out, and it was a very, very not good story. I ended up homeless because of it, so that sucked. But I started realizing that my sexuality wasn't where things stopped. I didn't, like, there's this whole questioning thing you go through, and it's like something doesn't feel right. What is it? And so you start trying to figure it out. And for me, for I think most trans people, but for most people in general, we start with our sexuality. And then, so, okay, I've nailed it down that I'm not straight. Great. That's awesome. That's done. But then it's like, okay, why do I still not feel settled yet? And so then I started on Tumblr, thank the Lords for Tumblr, discovering that there was this thing called genderqueer and trans and all these other things. And it was like, what the heck is that? And I realized, holy crap, that fits. And that terrified me. My family already wasn't in my life at this point, so it wasn't a huge deal for me to come out to them as trans. But I had to come out at work and transition at work. And I was working at Cracker Barrel at the time, which sounds like the worst place on the planet to transition.
But the yummiest.
It was definitely one of the yummiest places to transition. But everybody was pretty good. Like, there were a few people that had issues with it, but it was overall a good experience. At one point, there was one of my coworkers, when she found out I was a trans man and not a woman, she literally started to tear up, and she's like, now I can date you. like somehow she couldn't date me as a woman, but now that she could see me as a man, she could date, and nothing happened, but sorry to bore you. But yeah, that was like a really cute, heart-touching moment for me. In order to come out as trans to my family, I literally just wrote them all an email the day I was starting hormones and said, hey, next time you see me, kind of didn't say this, but the connotation was, if you see me again, I'm going to look a little bit different, and explained everything to them. And yeah, that was 7-ish years ago. So had top surgery a couple of years ago, which was amazing. Legally changed my name and gender marker a year before that. So I feel like I can finally start to function in this world.
Yeah. Awesome. So what was that? I know. So what was the process like for, especially the legal changing of your names for both of you and the gender marker? Because I know from working with you, you've had issues with your birth certificate and stuff like that. So can you guys explain the process of this? Because I know it's not an easy process. It's easy to fucking get married and then like have them change your last name for that. But to do something that is personal, that it's you as a person, it's essentially like you jumping through hoops for this. So if you guys can explain the process of that.
Yeah, so for me, and I'm sure you probably had this similar, since I wasn't born in Texas, but I live here, I have to get my name changed here, but they won't change my birth certificate. And the laws to get my name changed here, I've gotten that done. I ended up going to a court in Austin because some of the judges here will throw out your case if they see you're trans. So I didn't want to risk my chances. So thankfully there's an amazing group, pro bono group, that will help you do your paperwork and stuff through one of the law schools. So I went, had them help me with my paperwork, went up to Austin, took it to the courthouse and then got that done. And that part was shockingly easy, but it's been changing your name everywhere. And you have to come out, it's like you said, you come out multiple times. Every credit card I have, every bank I have, our house, everything that my name is legally on, I've had to go and have a copy of my document and then come out to them and explain to them why they can now have to legally change my name. And then you get sometimes weird things happen with that. People are like, oh, and they don't want to do business with you, but they have to legally. So there's been the awkwardness of that, and I still haven't been able to change. I don't know if you've been able to, but I still can't change my birth certificate because I contacted Georgia, but their laws for what they have to have in your name change document are not the same as what I got in Texas. So either I have to go to Georgia and change my name, but my name has already been changed, so I can't change it, but they won't accept my documents. So right now I don't have a birth certificate at all. Yeah. So I wasn't born. Essentially, or they would take it as my married name. So I was either born married or I wasn't born at all. So right now I just don't have a birth certificate, which is fun. Oh yeah, you had your name.
You have a passport?
Not if I have to show a birth certificate. I don't have a passport.
Yeah.
So if you have to show a birth certificate one, I cannot get a passport.
Because I think for a passport you have to show at least 2 other forms of.
Yeah, I think that's
because getting my license and all that updated was fine. You just like court document. But yeah, so we haven't gotten that sorted out yet. That's
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had that
Well, a
problem.
lot of states
Or not.
require you to have certain surgeries before.
Yeah,
Yes.
thankfully Texas is not one of those. They don't require hormones. They don't require surgery. I know a lot of people do that, but some people can't.
Yeah, a lot of
So-
people can't afford to.
Yeah. What was your experience?
Mine wasn't horrible. So I actually hired a local lawyer and spent $700 in order to get my name and gender marker changed, which was lovely.
Eric! seat for you. You get to sit right here in the middle.
We're gonna make you awkwardly climb over us. But
Oh, I decided to be nice.
Oh, okay.
Yes, our third panelist is
Yes.
alive. This is Eric, everyone. So we're gonna finish Parker's story first, and then we're gonna come back to introducing you, Eric. So you didn't get to miss the introduction.
Okay.
Okay, so getting my name and gender marker changed. So it was surprisingly easy, depressingly expensive. $700 here in San Antonio. I went to a lawyer who's done it before, who goes to the judges that are going to actually do it here in Bexar County, as opposed to obviously the judges that won't. And so we sat before the judge, and that was super nerve-wracking, but it was fine. Like, it was just because you're sitting in front of a judge. And they signed everything, and then go and get your driver's license changed, your social security card. My driver's license was cool because I actually had a really good experience with that one. The person, I don't remember their name, who was at the DMV I went to that saw what we were doing, she was super excited and she was so happy for me. And it was just this crazy experience, because when you're trans, you don't ever expect that. You expect every single experience. Like, you have to go into it prepared to deal with the people who don't want to have to deal with you and don't think you should exist, but they legally have to do their job. Unless SB 17 passes. But so my driver's license was awesome. Like, it was really cool. My social security card was just painfully slow and boring, waiting for them to call your number. And then the weird thing that happened after I changed my name is I got a draft card in the mail, which I was like, what? Oh yeah, I guess I'm a guy now, so I have to deal with this shit. So that happened, and then my because I was born in Canada, so my birth certificate is not changed yet, but your birth certificate is always changed based off the laws where you were born. So that's why, like William was saying, it can be really complicated getting your birth certificate changed. And then let's see, the weirdest thing that happened was I didn't realize that when you legally change your first name, your credit histories do not update. When you legally change your last name, it's fine, because that happens all the time. People get married all the time. But when you legally change your first name, you literally have to go through an entire process with all the credit bureaus of either trying to get them to fix it, which don't waste your time, just in case you're changing your first name. But I had to basically go and open up new lines of credit in order to get new credit established, and then it would tie my old credit and my new credit together. And I was trying to buy a car at the time, so it was really frustrating. So that was something I didn't know was going to happen. It was a pain in the butt. The only other thing that really stuck out to me was when I called Geico to have them, my car insurance, to have them change my stuff. They were really, really positive and supportive too on the phone. Like, they told me congratulations, which is just weird. So good job, Geico. Or one person who works for Geico, at least. Let me be specific.
Just a little gecko. Just
Yeah.
say congrats.
Exactly.
You saved over $200.
Congrats.
Yeah.
You've transitioned.
Exactly. Awesome. So, Eric, thank you for joining us. So if you can give us a little backstory on you, maybe just what you do for a living, and also maybe when did you start your transition? I was like, my brain just would say, turn off.
All right, Sorry, I was late. And as you know me, that's a pretty common thing. Yeah, so my name's Eric Macias, also known as Eric LaRue within the community. My transition, my story is a little bit different than these guys. You're going to see my age come out here for sure. I would say I socially started to transition when I was 2004, but internally started my transition when I was 5. So back in 2004, the only search engine out there that gave information was Yahoo. And there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. Everything was, in California or different states. And there wasn't a representation of trans men, which was challenging because I felt like I was crazy. I'm like, I know this is how I feel. I know this is who I am. But where do I start? What do I do? So I remember something that happened in my life that when I was living as a lesbian, I was assaulted by about 3 or 4 men in a lesbian bar at that. And it was a pretty intense situation, but I knew at that point, because I could have been I was severely hurt, that it was time for me to live in my truth. I knew this, I felt like this was my second shot at life to be who I am. And I literally hit the floor running. But that was problematic as well, because I went to a doctor who literally opened up her blue medical book and said, okay, so what do we do? So and her kind of learned together. And if you're familiar with testosterone, I think she got me like on 200 cc's a week. Yes, I know. Yes, I know. So it's just not good. So a lot of growing pains in that. So at the time, my process was very quick. I found an attorney who was able to change my name. So I got on a hormone replacement therapy. Then I went and had my name changed. But at the time, the attorney that I went to wasn't aware that in the state of Texas, he was under the impression that you needed to have surgery in order to have your gender marker changed. So I figured, having my name changed is better than nothing. But what's really complicated about that is all my work history. I was working for a really well-known company at the time, and they did not embrace my transition at all. So I walked away from that and started fresh, like literally working a minimum wage job. So the obstacle in that was I had my whole work history in my previous name, and I had to present my name, like who I was now. So that was quite a challenge. Sometimes they would glaze over it, not a big deal. But I would say it wasn't a problem at all, just having my name changed. And then I want to say it wasn't until, my experience at Social Security office was very, very different. It was very different when I went. What I would experience a lot, even at DMV, was that they always had to talk to a supervisor, or we need to see the letter. And it was always a big ordeal for people to just want to, even though I had a legal document, they didn't want to honor it. So I want to say it was 2004. And then I want to say it was up until this past year. It was in 2017. I finally figured out that you can get your gender marker changed without any surgery. But my journey was a little different. And when my name changed, that total cost was $200, and it didn't require any documentation. And I got mine done in Austin, and it didn't cost anything. But they were really nice. They didn't give me a hard time at all. So it's been interesting because it's like I've been living as I am with my legal name, but my gender marker still said female. But I'll tell you, a lot of times it was presenting my ID that would always think either I was crazy or something was wrong or there was a typo. Mm-hmm. Which brings me back to DMV. When I went to go renew my driver's license, I remember the lady kept saying, "This is wrong," and she was like, "This is not right." And I thought she meant the spelling of my name because it's spelled with CK. Well, she changed my gender marker to male without even realizing it. So yeah, so she changed it to male.
Bureaucracy.
Yes. Yes. So I was kind of in limbo because I had my legal document as male, my ID, but everything else said female. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yes.
It's a freebie.
That's true. So I ended up finally getting my birth certificate. I finally got it a couple months ago. But I will say in this process, in this journey, one thing that I did was I knew how I was very lost. I didn't want other people to be lost. So I started to become an advocate. And it's been a blessing and a curse being an advocate, I'll tell you that. But I will say there's a lot of reward in it, but that's just kind of what's brought me to this journey today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, round of applause for you. So transitioning, there's a lot that happens with transitioning. Not only do you transition the legal side of everything, you transition with your physical side. What's been the hardest part of your transition so far that you guys have had to face and overcome, that you say really sticks out to you the most, it's been the hardest?
Are we starting with me again?
Yeah.
I'm just, for me, because I've only been transitioning for a little over a year, I feel like I haven't hit some hurdles yet. Definitely it's been a combination of really like financial responsibility, because there's a lot of people don't realize how much money you put into transitioning, your hormones that you have to pay for every month, the name change, surgery, that sort of thing. So it's been definitely a financial burden, but also just the emotional process of all of it. For me, not even the responses like I've gotten from other people, but for me in general, dealing with my own like anxiety and stuff with it, it's helped a lot of that. But at the same time, you have more questions now. Like you worry about, am I, someone going to look at me differently because of this, or what if someone finds out about that? So that personally for me has been some of the stressors.
Yeah.
Just the uncertainty that comes with transitioning, and also waiting around for testosterone to do its thing. So it's like, come on, facial hair. I believe in you. I believe in you so much. So that's why I'm not shaving. I'm proud of my sideburns. I'm starting to get on. So yeah, if you see me scruffy, that's why. I worked hard.
That's awesome. Eric?
I would say the biggest challenge, and this is something a lot of people don't talk about, is being comfortable and connecting with my physical self now that I've had top surgery. The biggest hurdle was being confident and getting reacquainted with who I was. I've shared this before, which some people found it to be a shock, is that before I had any procedures done, that I felt I was far more confident. So now I have to remind myself at times that it is okay, we're raised a certain way, and to, especially culturally, to be a certain way, that it is, I finally have connected that it is okay to connect with my past as well, regardless of how I look. So the financial as well is an obstacle. I don't think people really realize that how much you have to put into that. But also knowing the expectations that people have of us, as in what type of men that we should be. And I think it's weird. All trans people, it's like the token anxiety, stresses. I would say that's the.
Literally everything you do, you think of like, would a guy do that?
Yes, you start to question
the way you're sitting, the way you do everything.
Am I moving my hands too much? What does my voice sound like? How am I dressed? What does my body look like? You're constantly.
I think that's something that we are fortunate enough now in this generation to be able to see people say, fuck gender norms, like fuck stereotypes. Like if you want to talk with as many hand gestures as you want, do it, as I do it with a bunch of hand. But like it doesn't really matter so much anymore. But when there's other issues going on where you're feeling like in and out of your body, like that just is amplified even more. So I totally see where that could be a struggle for sure. That's awesome that you overcame it though, because look at you now.
It's awesome.
Awesome and Parker. I love that you preface that with a lot.
Well, like everything, what William said, what Eric said, they're so huge, especially connecting with your body, because for myself specifically, until recently, I haven't, I have a new partner, and this is the first time in my life that I've been able to enjoy sex and not be in my head and be able to actually be okay with my body. And it's a really weird experience. Like I told her, I know, I'm definitely not a virgin, but it's like I'm a virgin in a way, because I've never experienced anything to do with sex in my body in this way before, in a non-traumatic way, which is just such a weird experience. So definitely I agree with what you said, but I think the biggest and hardest thing for me has been the mental side of things. So kind of like what William, and I mean, we're all saying the same stuff, just focusing on and dealing with my mental health that has been utterly devastated because of my experiences in life, because of being trans. all the depression and anxiety that are tied to PTSD from like my entire childhood, like everything. That has really been the hardest part, and just simply accepting that I have so much to deal with and so much to work through I'm 28. I started transitioning like 7 years ago, and now is when I'm dealing with this stuff. Like it doesn't stop. But that also translates into non-trans people as well. So that's not very trans specific, but it's part of transitioning for me at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know you kind of spoke about it for a second, but sexual orientation and gender identity are two very different things. I would say gender identity and sexual orientation, it's hearts versus parts, It's two very different things. Now, I know for some trans men, as they start testosterone, sometimes the sexual orientation changes for some men. What is your current orientation, and has it changed once you started testosterone?
Mine hasn't changed at all. I've always been interested in guys,
Mhm.
and that was actually one of the things that helped me realize I was trans. Growing up, I was in a very sheltered environment. I had never heard the word trans, but when I was a young teenager, I came to my sister and I said, "Have you ever felt like a gay man trapped in a woman's body?" And she's like,
I remember you telling me that.
And before I even put that on to him, I was like, "Don't be offended by this." I'm like, "What?" And I just remember telling it to her, and she's like, "That's not a thing," because she was raised the same way as me. We didn't know. But for me, like, I had always identified as a gay man, but I didn't know why I did. So for me, mine hasn't changed. It's just like I'm like, "Oh, that's why." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." So if anything, I've just gotten more so, and I'm more comfortable, because before I feel like I would try to be so not feminine. In fact, everyone that worked here thought I was a lesbian when I first started working. They're like, "You have such a butch vibe going on." But I was like, "No, I swear I like guys." But I was trying not to be feminine.
You showed up wearing a blouse one day, and I was like, "Who are you?"
Yeah, they have a video of it too. It's so weird. And I'm like, delete that. Make that go away. But, like now, especially as I'm transitioning, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm gay." Like, I don't mind being a little bit more feminine. Sometimes I was like, "I'm just gay." I can do whatever the hell I want. But yeah, so that's me.
So it didn't really change.
It didn't
for you.
change for me.
That's good. Eric, did it change for you?
No, I'm straight. I like women.
Yeah. Awesome.
We're opposite ends of the spectrum.
Awesome. And
I should be sitting in the middle because
Yeah.
it's a queer unicorn.
I'm rainbow. Yeah, in the middle of the transition.
I don't think mine changed, but I think it was more I was still figuring out and trying to understand what I liked and who I liked and that sort of thing through until very recently. So it's been an evolution more than a change. Like, I like people.
Yeah.
Typically, like, either I'm attracted to a human or I'm not, and that's pretty much how it breaks down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the same thing at all. But I want to put an aside on your sexual orientation versus gender identity thing. Like, my favorite phrase that I've heard, and I'm sure some of you guys have heard this before, is that sexual orientation or your sexual identity is who you go to bed with. So like your partner, right? If you're gay, it's with somebody of the same sex as you. And then your gender identity is who you go to bed as. So do you go to bed as a man, as a woman, something in between? So that kind of is something that has helped a lot of people understand the difference. And something too that I want to, just add on, because apparently I'm doing that tonight. So my partner is a bi woman, and she is not feminine. She's a little bit more masculine, but sometimes she's kind of in the middle, I guess. So, and I'm kind of in the middle too. I don't know where I am. I'm me. So it's really interesting because together we can give off a very lesbian and gay man vibe, which is interesting because we're very much attracted to each other and together. And so who we are as individuals, how we experience our gender as individuals doesn't impact our attraction to another, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a weird visual dynamic Well, it is weird, but it's good weird because it's unusual.
It's 'cause
And
you're
I,
weird.
I am weird.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of it, is that, you know, we as human beings get to dictate our life's journey. Like, we get to say what we want to do, how we want to present ourselves to the world.
Yes.
And a lot of the times, because of how we live in the society that we are, the minute you say you're a trans man, do you automatically feel like you have to be hyper masculine to fit into the heteronormative society? Or do you feel like it's kind of like you just said, I'm just me? Like, how does that correlate to you guys? Like, in the way you guys
I feel for me, it was immediately that it's like, okay, now I need to be this guy who's like tough and
Mhm.
you know hardcore, you know, just like be like a man's man was the impression that I was under. But as time has passed, I realized that does not constitute who I am as an
Sure.
individual.
Mhm.
I wanted to add something about Parker was saying, just going back a little bit. I think this is important. No, this is important. One of the things that happens, and a lot of times in our identity, is that who we date or who we're involved in, there's an assumption that we have to put an identity on that person,
Yeah.
which is not right. It's not okay, and I don't think that's fair. But just wanted to make sure I added that.
No, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
William, I mean, you're married to your
Yeah.
husband,
Mhm.
and that's been a process for you guys, right?
Yeah,
Hayden's
definitely.
here. Hi, Hayden.
Husband's here. Yeah, we have been married almost 7 years. So for the first for the first 6 years of our
In
marriage,
years, that's like 30.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
it's been a journey. Now, I was like, he should be saying that. He's the one that's very easy to get along with. But, so for like the first 5.5, 6 years of our marriage, he had a wife, you know, and growing up, he always, and sorry, I'm talking for you, but I'm up here with the microphone. So I know that growing up, you know, he always very much identified as straight, and so I didn't get the questions as much when I started coming out, but people were bombarding him like, "Well, are you gay now?" And he's like, "Well, no." Like, "Well, you're, huh?"
They still bombard.
Yeah, people constantly, and especially whenever they find out when he says something about, "Oh yeah, my husband," and they'll look at him like, "Oh, we didn't think you're gay." He's like, "Well, I'm not." They're like, "But you're married to a guy." And he's kind of come to, I guess, the conclusion or the easy assumption to give people, he's like, "Well, I'm bi," you know, because he's sexually attracted to women and me. So
You represent the men in the world.
I all the little ones that look like me. But, you know, I feel like that was a lot harder for him because me, I've always felt like a gay man. So it was easy to me to come out and be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just gay." But for him, you know, people would constantly they're like, "Oh my goodness, well, what does that make you?" You know, and I feel like that wasn't fair because I'm transitioning, that people are not going to question him when that, it's not that it was something out of his control, but, you know, like, it's not him. You know, but our partners, all, like, people start bothering them too. So,
Mhm.
Do we have any questions from you guys here or on social media?
I can
Any questions here?
my classes were not that good.
I know.
There's people watching, but
People
there wasn't
watching.
questions yet.
Yeah, what's your question?
Okay, so I think a lot of like people in the queer community want to be good allies. What are ways that you think we can be better allies to U.S.
Can you show us your record? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So for everyone on Facebook, if you couldn't hear that,
Yes.
the question was for people who are allies for the trans community, how can you be a better ally? And what are things that you can do?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I guess I'm gonna answer this one. Is being actively involved. It's like I tell people who want to be an ally, they say, "Well, you know, I have this gay friend." I'm like, "Well, I have a dog. Like, what does that mean?" It doesn't mean anything. You know, it's like that means you just know somebody. So just actively being involved, educating yourself. The other thing also is there's a way also to speak up when things are happening that are not okay, and you don't necessarily have to out yourself either, or, you know, get into too much detail. Because I mean, there are some spaces where I'm not out as a trans person at all, because I don't feel safe, and I'll hear something and I'll just, you know, intervene and say, like, "You know what, my views are a little more liberal than that," or, you know, just kind of reiterate that we're all people. I think that's the key thing, is just making sure to be a visible voice, or when you see something going on.
Yeah, especially here in the South. We still live in the South where things are, you know, still very conservative and very, you know, just like, and like you said, some places you just don't feel comfortable being outed. And I mean, that goes for a lot of us in the LGBTQ community. So it's very important to kind of like, you know, as cisgender people or friends of someone who is LGBT, to not out each other, you know, or to not out someone, because you don't know if the repercussions of that could be, you know, I mean, you could still get fired for being openly gay. So there's a whole bunch of things that could happen. So I think that's really important to, you know, as an ally, to ask questions too. I mean, would you guys
Yeah.
agree?
That's why we're here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and not to be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
I would say that we can sincerely see when someone's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
A lot of times,
Yeah.
certain language is used not because someone's being disrespectful; they just simply don't know.
Yeah.
So I would say to not just ask a surface question. Like I think it is okay to ask, or even say, you know, I don't know how to quite ask this, but here's my question. Because the one thing that really bothers me is when we have discussions like this, it's like after we're done, it's like, hey, well, I had all these questions, and I always want to say, well, you know what? I'm pretty sure if you had the question, there were probably about 4 or 5 other people had the same question.
So what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about trans men in general?
That we're all straight,
That we don't exist.
that we have it easier than trans women. I'm not the.
I had a lot, I just lost it.
I think a really big one too is that the penis makes the man is a lot of misconception regarding trans men. Like people who are not remotely familiar with trans or LGBTQ issues in general, when they
That's
ask
the
me
first
questions,
question.
that is the question they
Are
ask.
you getting the surgery?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
they always
So
ask
do you
that.
have a penis now?
Yeah.
It's like
Screw it overnight.
That's testosterone, that first shot.
And you get to pick which order you want things in
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Like it's really cool.
That's the other thing too, and it's the assumptions that we are doing things in a certain order,
Yeah.
or that we need to do them in a certain order, or that every trans guy wants to have top surgery.
Yeah.
That we no longer have emotions. I think that's a thing. Sometimes people get taken back. That it's like, you know, why are you so sensitive? It's like, well, I've only lived my life X amount of years this way.
Yeah.
That we know how to do masculine things that we're supposed to learn. And
Well, he already did, so I used it to good use. And I'm like, hey, Will, you want to fix this? He shows up with his toolbox. I'm like, yep, here. So that he's another case. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's like the biggest misconception is that people automatically assume that there's an order to things, and then on top of that, it always comes back to genitalia, and you're just like,
Everyone always wants to know what's in your pants.
yeah.
But they won't show you what's in theirs. It's so weird.
So, not to go into it as deep as we can, because I feel like this could go into so many different things, but because of that, though, public restrooms, the whole bathroom bills, all that stuff, which is totally stupid. But how have you guys had to have any type of issues with that, or have you had any issues with that, or you guys kind of breezed through it, anything like that?
I haven't had any exactly like bad experiences really, so maybe other guys can share something that I haven't experienced. But before I got my gender marker changed, I had made a trip to go see my family in Georgia, and the laws in Georgia are you have to be in the bathroom that's on your ID. Not like they're going around checking ID, but at that time I was like 6 or 7 months on testosterone. I was already socially, I was already wearing all guys' clothes. I was trying my best to present as male at that time, and I go over there, but the entire time I was there, I had to use the women's bathroom. One, because I was with my family who does not accept my transition, and they would cause me grief when I tried to go in the men's. But if I got caught in the men's, or it was weird. It was like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Essentially, I just try to avoid going to public bathrooms. I'm just now getting to a point where I occasionally, if I have to, I'll go in the men's. But over there, it just wasn't safe because I'm like, if I go in the women's and someone says something, I can flash my ID and be like, I can be in here. But I got some of the dirtiest looks going to women's bathroom. Guys don't even look at me. I go in there, they're doing their business, and they may or may not wash their hands, and they leave. The women, it's always like they got their kids and they're looking at you like, are you supposed to be in here? And I'm like, I just want to pee, please don't cost me. But I never had anything happen, but I had some of the dirtiest looks all the time, so I was just terrified to go.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys had any interactions with this?
I did recently, which
Yeah.
was at Luther's out of all places.
What?
Yeah.
Huh. For those of you who aren't in San Antonio, Luther's is
It's
a LGBTQ friendly restaurant. They do karaoke nights and drag shows and check them out.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I don't know.
Once you actually hear the story.
Well, it was maybe a couple months ago, and the interesting part, it had to do with the trans opera production, and there was a lady who went into the men's restroom and wanted to know if I was a man or a woman. And I'm
She
thinking-
followed you in?
Yeah, she did. And her justification was like, it's okay because my son is trans, and I'm like, that makes it worse. But other than that, yeah, I know it was really strange. Yeah, Yeah.
She's wrong?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I would say that's the only thing. Other than that, hasn't really been much of an issue going and using the men's restroom. I think before my transition, I would have a hard time going into the women's restroom. Like they would want me to leave, but no issues so far. I've been pretty lucky.
Yeah, good. Parker?
Yeah, I haven't had any issues, but one thing that I've been aware that I experience is that I am very, very cautious about going into any restroom in public. Once I started going to men's restrooms, like I was terrified the first time I went to a men's restroom. Like I was petrified, even though me going in a woman's restroom at that point would not have been a good idea. I was absolutely terrified to go into a men's restroom because I was just so scared somebody would hear me sitting down peeing. I was terrified. And it didn't help that it was at a rest stop in like Arkansas or something. So worst possible place to explore that. Thankfully nothing happened, but the level of anxiety and stress I've had to constantly be working on, because I'm constantly aware of if there's somebody else in the bathroom. And if they are, is their body making noises so I can make noises at the same time and they won't really be able to tell what's going on if they're paying attention, which they really aren't. It's so ridiculous every time you go to the bathroom to be focused on that and thinking about that without trying to be. So that's pretty much been my experience, is just trying to get rid of the stupid anxieties around it and not to care. Like, so I pee sitting down, deal with it.
And it's something that cisgender people, we take for granted sometimes. Something as simple as just going to the bathroom seems normal for
Yeah.
all of us. But for you guys, you have to think, like, okay, is it worth possibly one, having to deal with someone wanting to follow me into the bathroom?
Yeah.
Two, asking questions. Like, it's a lot to think about. And so I could totally understand why, like, you choose to go to a place where you know for sure, like, you're not going to get asked questions.
And so many times I've also, when I'm out like with my husband, I'll like make him go in the bathroom. I'm like, is there even a stall? Because I've been in places before
Yes.
where they either didn't have a stall, and I'm like, I can't use a urinal. Like, how am I supposed to pee? So like I've literally sent him in before, like, one, to make sure there's a stall, and two, like, is it empty before I go in there? Because I'm not gonna just stand there. Because that's like
That's the
thing,
worst.
is
Is
you
when
don't
there's
go
like
and
one or
stand
two
in there.
stalls and you go in. I call it like the bathroom dance. You go in and go out, and you don't
Yeah,
want to
you-
wait, or you're in line and like, okay, I'm literally in my mind like, wait, there's all these urinals, there's two stalls, and I'm timing the people like, okay, I'm like, oh shoot, this guy's going too fast. Okay, it's so all this is going through my meaning like, am I gonna make
It's
it
a
in time
dance.
to get to the stall?
Yeah.
That's all I want to do. Or it's having to go and you don't want to just stand there because then that's just.
And also,
weird.
they just all stare at you.
Yes, they
If you
just stare.
stand, and then like the longer they stare, the more they're
They're
like
wondering.
looking.
Yeah, it's
Like,
just-
and you can just see their mind turning. I've had that happen a couple
Or
times.
walking
It just
in and out.
terrifies me. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
No.
So we all know this, my partner's a trans woman and she went through all that anxiety and still does. And so whenever we're anywhere and there's like a family bathroom or a
Those
unisex
are the
bathroom,
best.
it's always like, whew.
And thank you, Target.
Yeah. And I know that like in California now they're passing laws that I think like any single stall bathroom has to be unisex. Have y'all noticed like in San Antonio that there are more options, or is it getting better, or is it still very?
There are some spots, like I know at Tycoon Flats, they made it a unisex bathroom with no single stalls. But I know, like, I'll have to sometimes I'll just research where I'm going just to see and what's the bathroom situation like.
And that's not on Yelp, so.
No, they're not.
Tell you what gyms are having.
Yeah.
No. Someone needs to design that. You're gonna make a lot of money.
Yes, get an app of which stalls.
Hey, get on that.
There you go. Yeah, do you guys have any other questions? Anything from the audience? Yes?
I was wondering, just to pivot the conversation completely to, have you experienced anything different with regard to like health insurance costs because of the healthcare? And can you speak to like how much each of you has it been hard to access that? Like, have you found competent providers, and then like how much? Sorry, it's like,
No. It's
We're not
okay.
laughing
No,
at
we're
that.
not laughing because it's
We're
just
laughing
our
at the-
it's our reality.
Yeah.
It's-
Um,
you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. So, health insurance hasn't been the most tricky thing for me. Now that I'm self-employed, I have to pay a lot more for it, but that doesn't really change. Before my employer was just paying more of it, and so I've been able to find an endocrinologist that I work with, and they are pretty good. I'm not willing to say that they're completely trans supportive yet, even though they want to be, because they're not. But I've never had any personal issues with them. They understand where I'm coming from. They understand they have other trans patients. They're fine with it. So in that regard, it's been good. They're not super experienced, which bothers me because I don't want to have to be my own doctor. I shouldn't have to be my own doctor. There's a reason I'm giving them too much money. My top surgery was not covered by insurance, and for very few trans people, any type of surgery is. So that sucked because even though I was paying for health insurance, I still had to pay $8,000 for surgery.
$8,000.
Yes.
That's not even on the high end. Even
No.
for what some guys pay.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah, it can range from like 5 to 15 in a very broad scale. But yeah, so that sucked. And then as far as competent providers, the one I've had the hardest time finding has been mental health, of all things. Because I even have a mental health professional. I had a therapist for a while, and she's not straight. She's in the community, but she doesn't, well, I felt like, therapy jargon.
How does that make you?
Right? I know. Well, it made me feel like she didn't understand me. Because a lot of people just do not unless you lived as a trans person, you're most likely, or you literally study it for a living, you're not going to understand how pervasive gender is in every single thing in this world. Gender roles are the things I want to strangle. Like, it's ridiculous. And so for me, as a trans person trying to work on my mental health, deal with all the trauma from my childhood, being forced to live in a very, very female, conservative Christian life, like, it's something that I haven't found anybody who can help with yet, basically, which sucks.
I would say that's the challenge, is finding competent providers. I was fortunate that my health insurance did cover 2 procedures that I had, and even at that, they still, like my top surgery. And one thing I want to stress, what we're sharing is that we're sharing this on our own free will. I think a lot of times people make the assumption that they have the right to ask us these things. So I just stress that because not every trans person is going to be willing to share that. So I know, like with my top surgery, it was about $3,000, and then with my hysterectomy, it was about $500, and that was because it covered on my insurance. But the obstacle in that is finding providers who can actually provide you that care that you need. Like as trans men, we still need to go see the OBGYN, and that is, I know, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, and that in itself is, it can be traumatic having to go get the proper care. And so even when you find a competent provider, having to deal with their office staff and it's like you have a resume of your life every single time you have to go. Or even mental health providers, where a lot of times they'll put LGBTQ, and like just because they have those acronyms doesn't necessarily mean that they're versed in what our needs are.
Yeah.
Or worst of all is we have to be the provider, or they think everything that's going on has to do because we're trans. Everything is related to our transition. And I know you said something, or a couple that, we've said it as far as like past trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And having to explain that. So I don't want to say that we're traumatized people, but it's just in being, unless you understand being transgender, having to live a life that you're not who you are can be traumatic. So having to work through those kinks is difficult. But
yeah, it's not being trans that is traumatic.
No,
it's
having
being
to
in a
live.
world that exists that we live in right now is what the trauma comes from. It doesn't come from being trans.
No, it's just that we're not able to be who we are. But
Yeah.
So that's a challenge.
You experienced trauma in the past, and are you getting the care ask for PTSD with a specialized psychiatrist, because right now you helping us to understand you and everybody else here. But it's like you're rehashing all the time and bringing the past to you to every panel. Are you okay? Are you rehashing this brings you bad memories, but you're dealing with it? Are you all dealing with it? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yes, it's having to reshare
you
that
can
story.
be to know your past,
Mhm.
but going home, is it?
Yeah, like does it bring back the trauma?
Thank you for recognizing that, because
It's a
I think-
very thoughtful question.
No, thank you. I appreciate that you asked that, because that's the one thing in sharing our stories that a lot of times I've declined certain discussions because it depends what headspace that I'm in. But you are correct. You do, and rehashing that out, you're reliving. So it does. I do see somebody for that, and I don't feel embarrassed to share that. But it does affect. And I've learned in past when I'm not okay to recognize that it's okay to say no, because that is true. Having to relive that and share it again, it's tough. But no, I do see somebody for that. But that does happen sometimes.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm here to learn. If there was a dictionary that would have all the terminology, I'm still confused about you two in the end.
I think this is
Classic.
the perfect time to ask, because you're correct. The
Yeah.
one thing that I think is terrible is a lot of times people will present to us statistics, and I'll ask, where do those statistics come from? And it's like, usually cisgendered people, and it's like, oh, you want me to go off of facts that are not from trans people. So I think it's best to.
It's a new world, I think, and I don't know what happened in the past. Like right now, we are fortunate to have the operations, the technology around the world. What happened 50 or 60 or 80, 100 years ago? So
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing too, like
You don't want the
trans
answer.
people have been around.
Yeah.
It's not something that's brand new.
Yeah.
It's not something that just, is trending right now. This
Yeah.
is something that, we're
Yeah.
trans
The
people.
world was
Exactly. So, yeah, but it's definitely for sure something, and even in the LGBTQIA plus community, that in itself is something to learn already. What all those letters stand for. So I think just I'm right there with you where I wish there was a dictionary for terminology and everything. But you're doing the right thing by asking questions, especially in a place like this now where you can.
Well, and certain websites like HRC have glossaries.
Oh, okay.
They do.
Where, yeah, like LGBTQ friendly organizations where like input is given by the community. I think GLAAD might as well, but I know for sure HRC does.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Do you guys have any other questions for our panel? Yes. Lead with Adele.
The important thing.
That was a question.
Yeah.
So I know Will personally, and I know that you've kind of found, I'm not gonna speak for you, you can speak about this more, but you've kind of found refuge in drag king, and being a drag king and exploring that a little bit with your burlesque performance. Are there any things that have helped you and been a resource or an outlet? And this is for everyone. Maybe it's your tribe or a sport league or something that kind of brings you joy where that might give other people an idea if they're in transition.
Well, definitely, like you said, one of the things that first helped me when I was transitioning, which was a recommendation from you, was Jasper said he's like, well, look into like these drag kings from Austin, and I started looking, and I was like learning more about like other trans guys and ways to explore your masculinity and stuff. And that was one of the things for me, because I got to dress up as like super hyper masculine and look in the mirror. And I remember the first time I did like full on makeup, I actually brought tears to my eyes looking in the mirror, and I was like, oh my God, there's the man looking back who's always been trapped inside. And it was just such an emotional experience for me. And now I have a lot of fun with it, but it was definitely for me something to kind of give me hope too, because especially when like you first are starting out transitioning and you just kind of feel like lost, just floating around. It kind of was showing me an end goal, like, this is what you're going to look like. Give yourself time, give yourself patience. And then I got connected with the center, and then the Men in Transition group here in San Antonio. I got to go there and like meet other trans guys, and it was just the first thing for me was like meeting other guys like me, because I had for so long felt like I was the only one who felt this way. And meeting other guys like me, I was like, oh my goodness, you know, I'm not crazy like I said I was growing up. You know, it's like these are other guys who have been through the same things as me. So for me, the biggest encouragement was meeting other people who were also transitioning, and also seeing people all stages, seeing people who hadn't started T yet, or like a year in, or, you know, like 10 years in, that sort of thing just gave me a lot of hope. Like, this might be my current situation now, but I know it's going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I did perform as a drag king early, right? Why are you laughing at me?
I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And that, for me, I was very connected with the performance community, because that was the only connection I had to other trans people. And there were trans women. I know one of my greatest mentors was Erica Andrews. And just knowing that she had a very normal life outside of the entertainment industry, which I felt some refuge, knowing that, you know, I can live a quote unquote normal life, you know, go to work and have a job and do the day-to-day stuff. And when that chapter, you know, closed, that's when I started to, you know, did the Men in Transition group. And that helps me also, because when I see there are moments where I figure like, what am I doing? Or, you know, nobody gets it. But when I get to see, you know, guys come in where they're figuring out who they are, and I see them one week where they're just not sure, and then I, you know, see them, it's like, hey, I got on T, and they're going down their journey. It's a very humbling experience, and it reminds me that this journey is never ending. So that, even though, like I said, it's a double-edged sword,
Yeah,
it's a blessing at the same time.
for sure.
For me, it's mostly been connecting with other trans people or knowledgeable in the community people who aren't necessarily trans themselves, but are genuinely like a trans family, even though they're not trans. So like when I first was trying to figure out what was going on, I found Saga, San Antonio Gender Association. And since that time, and I went there for a couple of years and made a bunch of friends, and it was really cool. And there were other trans people in my life, and it was this whole new world where I was finally living outside of my head a little bit. So that, and then social media, the internet, Tumblr, especially at the time, finding people who were either like me, who were different than me, but had similar experiences of not being accepted. And then especially just since then, it's been activism. So a lot of my friends are involved with stuff like this, or spend way too much time in Austin at the Capitol telling politicians they're idiots, in very nice terms. Attending memorials, attending Pride, of course, but that's a given. All the different like little marches and all that stuff, and it really helps you. It's helped me heal.
It's like it affirms who you are.
Yeah. And it really I've discovered has helped other people too, because I've now slid in some ways into a role where people that aren't trans are telling their trans friends about me when they're first starting to come out. And so now these baby trans are having someone that they have found that has already been there, and it's kind of a really weird experience to be on the other side of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess the last question we have, because we're gonna have to wrap up pretty soon, but
No.
it's probably the most basic question, but how important are pronouns? That's it. How important are they to you, and how important are they to the community?
Go for it, William.
For me, I mean, I feel like it is for everybody. Like, your pronouns are who you are, and it's how people see you. And I know for me, it's very important, and I get misgendered all the time. But again, I'm also like, I got to get the testosterone a little more time to do what it needs to do. But as I feel like every day we go out trying to present a certain way, and then when you've done all literally you can do, and someone throws out the wrong pronoun, it's just like those small little crushing moments. Especially when people do it on purpose to hurt you. That's the worst. And I think that shows just an absolute disrespect for you as a human being. You know, I wouldn't go up to someone and just like completely call them it or something. You know, it's like dehumanizing. And I feel like when you do that to someone to trans or anybody in general, if you're doing that in a derogatory sense or even accidentally, it's very crushing. So that's how it is for me.
The beginning was really important, just because at the time I felt that would validate who I was. Now I can say it doesn't bother me. There are times where, and people have slips, you know, like you can be talking to someone and they'll say she, and I'm thinking, wait, are they calling me that because they're misgendering me or what? But it happens. Going off of what you're saying, when people will say things like that are derogatory, I find that happens most when people are angry. Like they want to insult me, and I'm like, of course, that's just kind of below the belt. That's when they start, you know, saying she and it. Exactly. Start saying things like that to use it as a weapon to hurt. But that's when I realized, and this is one thing I always tell any trans person, it's like when people start to insult you that way, they're doing it just to hurt you. And that's the only thing they can do is bring it to misgendering you, then you're doing okay. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Pronouns are like what Eric said, they're so important in the beginning. They're so important because, and not just pronouns, but also I think using your correct name. Like a lot of people, like the hardest thing for their families is to use a different name for somebody that they love. And the name and pronouns tell you, or at least the experience of hearing them, is what that person thinks of me. And if everybody in your life that you love doesn't think of you the way that you've told them that you are, and that you've had to fight against not just society, but also yourself to simply accept, like I don't want to get dramatic, but like there's a reason that suicide rates are really high for trans people. And that is one of the pieces in it, is people not accepting and seeing us for who we really are. And when you're first transitioning, it's the worst and the hardest. And that's when it's more important to use the correct pronouns. And it is hard to do it. It really is hard. Like if you know somebody and you've known them their entire life as a female, and all of a sudden now they're saying, hey, I'm trans, I'm a guy, please use male pronouns, this is my name. Like, it's going to take a lot of mental gymnastics to get through that. It really is. And you probably are going to make mistakes. But it is also like the absolute most important thing you can do.
But even trying though is so appreciated. Like if people make mistakes, that's okay because you're still trying. Like I've had a lot of people be like, oh she, or they'll see my own and they're like, oh I'm sorry, and they'll fix it, and I'm like, it's okay because you're trying.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And if you're corrected too, don't be offended that you've been corrected. I mean, because that's happened to me. Like I've referred to someone either as she or him, and they were a they pronoun. And for me, that was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so sorry, I didn't even think about that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like your initial reaction whenever you're corrected, you're like, oh no, I did something wrong, and you want to make up for it. But it's just accepting it and moving on, and just moving forward, calling them by their correct pronouns. So no, I totally get it. And like, if you are corrected, don't be embarrassed by it, because it's how we learn, it's by asking questions. And
Really quick question, because this is new. So
Yeah.
I just saw it, I don't know when I saw it on TV.
Uh-huh.
Binary, you just mentioned the date.
Mhm.
Quick explanation, because I don't know how to, it's still new.
Binary would be someone like myself. Like I'm male presenting, I'm straight. I'm gonna do what the quote unquote norms of society. Non-binary is someone who falls out of that spectrum. You're good at this.
Well, I mean, it's probably more like me than anyone else.
You're good on that. So you should definitely.
It's really hard to do this with words instead of visuals, because I have a graph that I really like. It's really cool. But like, what a color spectrum looks like? Like you have all the different colors, different intensities, different brightnesses, darknesses, etc. That's what gender is. It's not pink and blue.
Mhm.
It's that. It's all of that. So most people, yeah.
I was like, this is how the photographer thinks. I love it.
Always they fit it in.
They're in the middle. They're not on one end or the other. They're in the middle. They're either both male and female and feel very much
But I
both.
Okay, so the-
like
or-
I see Eric, I can say he. I see you.
Well, here's the one thing about that. There are some individuals who will look like me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they want to be referred to as they. So there's the
Mhm.
assumption. So that's one of the things. It's just the assumption. So one thing that I always encourage people to use are just gender neutral pronouns. So for example, if somebody has something in a practice, you don't have the box of like male, female, Mr., Miss. Sometimes it's okay to put I don't want to say it's other, but you can put they, them. That way, when they come into your office or you're addressing them, you have a better understanding, regardless of what's on the ID. Because you'll get some individuals who are going to look,
Yeah.
they're going to think that, oh, it's he or she, but they present it as they or them. The antiquated word is androgynous, is what people would say before, but now it's more they, them.
Yeah.
I think one word that helps describe it is sometimes people who call themselves non-binary call themselves gender non-conforming. I feel like that's almost a better visual.
Mhm.
So you
Yes.
don't conform to either gender.
That's easier for me to understand, but I just got shocked with the day, and I said the doctor said, you need to say they, and then explanation, and then I got taken away. Missed it.
Thank you for coming.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I want to thank our panel for joining us today. Where can they find you guys on social media? And if you want to get
Could you say my
Don't
face?
find
I didn't realize
if
that.
you want to reach out to you,
You're like, this was the one time.
Yeah. In case if anybody out there is watching and they feel like, okay, I can connect with you, if you guys want to give a resource for that. And, especially you have your group as
Yes.
well. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Where the people find you.
They can contact me through Facebook. It's under Eric Macias, or they can look up Eric LaRue. The other thing is through Gmail is menintransition2018@gmail.com. Also, you can find me through Pride Center San Antonio website as well. And yeah, that's it. That's it.
Parker,
That's it.
Where can people come and get their photos taken by you?
Yes. Okay, so if you need something to remember, my personal Instagram is PK Cheese, the food. So if you need something simple there, that is. But my photography is both on Facebook and Instagram, the PK Photographs with an S, because I gotta be extra, the PK Photographs. But yeah, you can Facebook me, Parker Radborn, whatever floats your boat.
And I'm here. Pretty much, it's like I work here at the Sexology Institute. So if you want to email me, like my work email is just my name. So william@sexologyinstitute.com is a really good way to contact me.
Or come by and visit.
Or come by and come see me. I also teach classes sometimes.
Yes.
So,
It's a resident kinkster. So yes. Yeah.
50 Shades of Kink.
So
Come to the class.
exactly on Saturday.
This Saturday, come to my class.
So thank you guys for joining us here. And if you guys have any questions and maybe you didn't feel too comfortable asking in front of everyone, I'm sure they'll hang out for a little bit answering your questions. But thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
It was triceps.